On today's episode of the Mamas Con Ganas podcast, I'm going to be giving 3 tips for overcoming mommy overwhelm. So I know that a lot of you that listen to me are mothers, just like me, and we go through our ups and downs because motherhood, I think, is the biggest challenge. Sometimes I realize that God has given me. We have so many things that we desire, right? And we aspire to transmit to our kids. All of those learning lessons and those experiences. It's sort of like we wish we could put a chip inside their head so they would skip all the mistakes that we've made and skip right to the good part, right? But the reality is we're imperfect human beings raising children, and sometimes it can be quite overwhelming. So this week I was driving in my car, and the message that I was receiving was give a podcast to that overwhelmed mama, particularly during these times, of COVID. We're still in the middle of a pandemic. Life is still not back to normal. I don't know about you, but my life has been like a roller coaster ever since last year. And particularly when it comes to routine, I think there hasn't been one week where my schedule has not changed because of the pandemic. I have 3 kids, 2 of my own, and a foster son. The 3 boys go to different schools. So it's dealing with 3 different schedules. So I'm the only girl, and let's say in the household. So it's the 3 boys, my husband, even my cat is male. So you can imagine the only female energy really in this house full of masculine energy. Um, Regardless, I think it would probably be the same challenge if it was all girls, but in a different way. Um, and this week in particularly, I've had some challenges. My younger son, who goes to a French school, he had no school for like 10 days. We had off because there was a COVID scare and the school is being very careful. And so I had him home. So I have my younger child at home. And at the same time, I work from home. I also help my husband with the finances, and we have a practice, an endodontic practice. My husband is an endodontist, and I also help him prepare for tax season. I produce the podcast. I'm an actress, so I have uh, auditions that come in regularly that I have to submit. And then on top of that, I have all of the boys' activities, and I'm dealing with 3 different boys, 3 different schools, and homework, and then all the extracurricular things. You can pretty much guess that it does become quite overwhelming. And I wanted to share 3 things that in my moments of chaos have truly helped me and continue to help me. Now, I, I am not the perfect mom. I don't think anybody is. We all try the best with what we have and with what God's given us. I can say that I try my best. These 3 things I'm going to share with you have been crucial in basically being able to maintain my sanity and my calm when things get really hectic. And I will say, because I'm always saying, don't be a mama con drama, let's be mamas con ganas, that it would be impossible for me to be a mama con ganas with a desire to push through and to push ahead and to become better. Because what I love about the self help world, and that's the type of information that I share with you weekly, is the fact that as humans, we're constantly growing and evolving. And as long as we're a better version today of ourselves than we were yesterday, although sometimes we might go backwards, right? Because our health might not be the same. We're feeling sick, and we can't be our best is not the same when we're feeling sick versus when we're healthy. But as long as we keep on growing from our mistakes, pushing through, becoming better people, I think, there's nothing more that you can ask of yourself. The only person I try to compare myself to is always the previous version of myself. When we compare ourselves to other human beings, like for example, on social media, when we compare our lives to somebody else's lives, then we can enter this downward spiral of not ever feeling good enough, of not ever feeling worthy, of always feeling like you need to catch up to something. I think the only real competition that we can have is with ourselves, and that peace only resides in knowing that we are doing our best at any given moment in time, even though sometimes our best might sometimes not feel good enough. Um, this week has been one of those weeks, where I've questioned myself and I've questioned I've questioned my ability as a mom. I've had to really do a lot of self introspection. The magic of that is that you come out on the other end with lessons learned, with experience. And when you actually look at the things that you do wrong and that can make better, you actually come out stronger on the other end. So if you're a mom feeling overwhelmed, this podcast episode is for you, mamacita. Now, these things, like I said, are 3 things that keep me sane amidst insanity sometimes, amidst all the crazy changes that happen in my routine. And I'm sure that some of you listening to me can relate, because schools have opened and closed and reopened, and then there's hybrid schedules, and it sometimes feels like our life is a whirlwind at the moment and that we have no real control. So I think this time for us is a time of learning flexibility and learning that even amidst all the changes, we are able to and we can survive, and that we'll get past and through this. That tomorrow won't be like today, and we'll push through. And then one day we'll be looking back and seeing at all the things we did today and be proud of ourselves for it. Okay. So moving to the 3 steps. I just wanted to share that message with you, because I know a lot of mamas out there that are overwhelmed, and they might be single moms out there who feel like they can't catch their footing. And so I want you to know, because sometimes we don't have anybody else tell us that you're doing fine. Good job for what you're doing. Because sometimes we don't hear that. As mothers, we get very little recognition. Sometimes instead, what we get is a lot of criticism, even when we're trying our best. So if you are going through a moment where you are with your kids and you're like, this is hard, yeah, but good job. Hang on there. The best is yet to come. So the tips are here. Number 1, be careful with the input that you bring inside of you. No, let me go back. So tip number 1, concrete tips for how to overcome mommy overwhelm is stop the noise from coming in. Be careful with the content that you consume. So with this first tip, what I want to let you know is imagine your mind and your mental space being like a sacred space. You need to be careful what you let come into that sacred space. So, like, I'm very intentional with this, and it's with regards to being careful with, for example, with how much social media that I'm consuming or the shows that I watch on TV. Because sometimes we don't realize just how much that stuff on the external world is affecting our inside and our mental space. So that's why the tip number 1 is really be careful of the noise that comes in. When we turn on the TV, let's say that we're home and we're working from home. I found that for myself, if I turn on the news and just let it run, that those thoughts that are said on TV, a lot of the times that negativity uh, of what's happening in the days, the political turmoil, the really devastating news that you might hear from any of the news channels, all of that stuff, you have to guard yourself against it. Why? Because it will have a direct impact on your thoughts, and then your thoughts have a direct impact on your emotions. And in order to be able to be at peace as a mother, you have to be able to take care of those emotions and to guard and to take care of yourself like a baby. Just like we wouldn't let our children watch um, a movie that's inappropriate for them, we have to be able to do the same thing for ourselves. Be able to say to think to ourselves, am I listening to something that's going to be good for me in the long run? Or is it garbage? Because if the input is garbage, the output is going to be garbage as well. So it's very important to be very intentional with what you decide to listen to, whether it's a podcast or who you're watching on TV. Your social circle, of course. But right now we're being so bombarded by the media and by things that are not even inside our circle, because we could be at home completely alone and still receive messages from social media and television that affect us in real ways. And if you think to yourself, well, how do I even start? I'm like sort of addicted to social media. Every moment that I have free, I pick up the phone and I look at it. I would say do something sort of drastic. I don't know if you guys do a Lenten promise. So I'm a Catholic Christian. And when Lent comes around, I make a sacrifice, right? And sometimes I cut something out of my life altogether. And I've done it with different things. Like on one occasion, I gave up red meat for 40 days. On another occasion, I gave up alcohol for 40 days, something that I sacrifice. So if you have an addiction to social media, for example, you could just say, okay, 40 days without that thing that I know is not actually doing any good for me. And you'll see how you feel just after 40 days of not watching and not consuming that content that might be bringing you down. Same thing with news, for example. If you're addicted to the news and you watch it on a constant day basis, or you're addicted to a particular show, but you notice that your mood sort of comes down after you watch that show, stop watching it. Do it drastically. Just cut it from your life for a while and then see how you start reacting. I find that when you're very intentional with what you let enter your space, your thoughts are better and your emotions are better. I also find that depending on the moment that you're going through in life, you have to be even more careful about this. Because if you're going through a very rough period in your time where you're going through the mourning process of somebody or someone, or a separation, or any type of loss in general, there might be content that you consume that might trigger that pain that you're going through. So in those moments in particular, you have to be very, very careful as to what you're watching and what you're paying attention to, because what you focus on expands. So if you're focusing on something that's negative, you're going to digest that negativity and negativity will come out. It's sort of like we can have all the good intentions in the world for something, but if we're actually consuming negative things, that negativity will consume us and it's impossible almost to feel good. So that's my first advice for moms that are overwhelmed. It's something that I really take to heart and that has really helped me is I'm very careful with what I decide to watch, whether it's a show on Netflix or whether it's a podcast that I listen to. Personally, I'm such a nerd. I listen to all self-help podcasts. I feel like that's what fuels me. It's what keeps me feeling good about myself. It's what helps me on that path to becoming better each day, because it's basically like finding my little niche, my little group of other women, because they're usually women that I listen to that are also inspirational, that are inspiring me. And that way I can keep coming back week after week and give my messages to you. I think it would be impossible to be able to do this podcast, but at the same time, consume content that brings me down. On social media also as well, I'm very intentional as to what I look at, the people that I follow, on a regular basis. I feel like the people that I see have to make me feel good inside. And if it doesn't, then and if it ends up being a comparison game, because I feel like it's a trap anybody can fall into, I just close it. I shut it down. And I try to remind myself that we're not in competition with anybody. The only person I can really compete with, like I said, is a past version of myself. And as long as I'm trying my best day in and day out, I'm in the right direction. Okay, tip number 2. So, tip number 1, be careful what you watch, what you listen to, what you're consuming as far as content. Tip number 2 is be good to yourself, mamacita. I know sometimes we get these messages from the external world that it's only about everything else and everybody else, and the last person on the list is you. And it can be and with all the mommy guilt, like nowadays, it's so easy to feel guilty. Like I work and I feel guilty I'm not 100% with my kids. Like when my child was home last week, it's like almost an impossible race to win. Because we feel the guilt when we're not working, when we're not doing our job, and then we feel the guilt when we're not 100% present with our children. And so we have to get to the point where we are also, it's not that we give up, it's not that we choose one thing over the other, but we have to be first good to ourselves and realize we're not perfect human beings. And we are also worthy of taking a moment to ourselves, even if it's just once or twice a week. For me, that moment to myself is my dance classes. I know I've talked about dance a lot on the podcast. If you've heard me listen to me before, you'll hear me say it's like my happy place. So, like I said, I live in an environment of all men, all masculine energy. And I think that if I wasn't so gun ho on keeping on dancing, like the men would have just taken over completely and I would have had no space to do that which I love the most, which is dance. And I realize that now. And after this week that's been so tough, I think I said to myself, wow, if I would not be respecting that one aspect of myself, because even with it there, life can be super difficult. But if I was completely neglecting where my happiness resided, then I would be doing myself such a disservice. Not only myself such a disservice, but a disservice to my children. Because those classes sometimes are like my oxygen masks. Like the week can be so depleting that I come in to my dance class and I leave feeling a little bit better, a little bit happier. And when I'm happier, I know that my children are happier. When we live in our head all the time and we don't allow ourselves to come to our bodies to exercise. That's why exercise is also so important. And for me, dance is both of those things. It's like my happy place, but it also allows me to step inside my body. And when I'm inside my body, I get out of my head. And in my head, the Valentina in her head can be so critical, such a perfectionist, double thinking everything, not taking any action because I feel like nothing is good enough. Like if I stay stuck in my head, wow, it's a complete disaster. So I need to step out of my head. So if you're feeling like you've almost lost that sense of self, you've lost that identity, your identity, like you left everything of yours go to the sidelines and your children and your husband and your house are taking over and you have no space, because I know a lot of mothers don't leave any more space for themselves, then I'm here to tell you I give you permission to take that little time to be good to yourself, to go back to your inner child, to do that which you love, to pamper yourself a little bit. And I don't know what it is that you love that literally brings you light, whether it's painting or writing or running or lifting weights or yoga, whatever it is that makes you step back into your childhood into that happy place. And if you don't have something, then your mission is to go out and find it. Where is it that you find joy? I'm sure you've experienced it somewhere. And then bring that joy to your everyday, because the routine can get to be so much and the to-do list can be so endless that if you don't prioritize it and actually put it on the calendar, it's like it never happens. So advice number 2 for the overwhelmed mom is do something for you. You'll thank yourself for it. Heck, your children will thank you for it later on. And my third advice for the overwhelmed mama is this. Sometimes we just need to find like that purpose. We need to attach a greater purpose to what it is that we do as moms. And I'm not thinking and talking about this huge, like, distant purpose that's like, I'm here to save the world or whatever. None of that. I'm talking about purpose in the mundane. When we actually take joy in like the tiny things that we do that sometimes we don't even like to do, and think to ourselves that what we're doing day to day, the little things that we do are the accumulation of those little things that we do daily are what make a huge impact, not only in our lives, but in our children's lives. Those habits that we form make a huge difference in our children. When pilots are in the air, they know that 2 degrees difference in direction takes them to a whole other destination. It's the same thing. Our habits that we do, the actions that we take daily, those mundane tasks that we have are not actually mundane. They all matter. All the little stuff matters in our day to day. So that what I try to do is put that energy of ganas and of drive into everything that I do. Even when I'm not doing exactly what would be like my first choice. And I've been practicing that this week a lot. Even just finding that peace and that purpose in the washing the dishes, in the driving my kids to the activities, all of those things, doing it, but from a place of contentment and doing those things from a place of, I'm here because I want to be here and I'm doing this because this matters. Because it does matter. You know that it matters. You know that those little things that you're doing day to day, that one conversation you have with your child, packed with the conversation you have with them tomorrow, with the conversation you had yesterday, all those conversations, they all make a difference in the end. It's the accumulation of all those little tiny building blocks that you're doing. But sometimes we just need to reconnect to that bigger purpose of the why you're doing that for your children. Why you're driving them to soccer or to, in my case, jujitsu. Why you get up in the morning early, put their uniform on, make the lunch and drive them. Like why? It's finding that purpose in like the little things. I know a lot of times as moms, we don't actually get like a pat on the back. But if I could literally come through the waves of this podcast, be next to you, I'd give you a tap on the back. I'd say, good job. You're doing good. Because even when we're doing when we think we're doing so bad, we know how much weight we have on our shoulders. Only we know individually as moms all the responsibilities, all the things, all the pressure that we feel to be good moms. I don't think anybody is intentionally a bad mother or wakes up and says, I'm not going to care about being a mom. I think individually we're all trying our best to relay and to share with our children and to truly give them the best opportunity that they can have. So I send you a big virtual hug. And remember those 3 things. First, be careful what you let come in. You have to have like this guard, like this bodyguard. Remember when we used to go clubbing? There was a bouncer outside of the club, and he would be choosing wisely who he wanted to let in the club or not. Same thing. You have to do that with your mind. Be mindful of the information you put in. Number 2, be good to yourself. Find something that brings you joy so you can bring back the fun in your life. Because if you're not having fun, God knows your children aren't having fun. And number 3, find the purpose in the tiny little things that you do. And know that all of those tiny little things really do matter. It makes a huge difference. I love you, mamacita. Go and tell me your comments, what you thought about this episode. mamasconganas.com/80. 80. 80. Man, that's a big number. 80, baby. Happy week. Love you.
Hey, it's Valentina. Espero te gustó este episodio de nuestro podcast. If you liked it, or if any of our content has inspired you in any way, I'd be ever so grateful if you showed some amorcito by reviewing us on iTunes or wherever you listen to us. Every single review will help us reach more mamacitas so they can live their life con muchas ganas. It's because of you, our listeners, that we're able to create contenido para otras latinas. 1,000,000 de gracias por suscribirte, escuchar y compartir nuestro podcast. Si tienen preguntas, comentarios y más, pueden visitar nuestra página web mamasconganas.com or follow us on social media at Mamas Con Ganas. You can also write me directly at info@mamasconganas.com. Hasta la próxima, es Valentina recordándote, don't be a mama con drama. Let's be mamas con ganas. Besitos.